Go. Well, hello, and thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Friday Reporter podcast. Today's episode is with Lance Turner, and Lance is the editor of Arkansas Business, and Lance is a nominee from our friend Bryant Adams. Lance, thanks so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So first off, every review from Bryant has been solid gold. So I'm super looking forward to this conversation. He, in my preparation for conversations, always, Lance, I do a little background, sort of investigating my own self just to get a sense of the flavor of the work that you're doing. It is Arkansas is a booming. The economy itself is booming in a way that is really, to me, perhaps hopeful for other states. But I won't be the one to report on that because you are steeped in that every single day. I'm curious,
Right.
though, will you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got started in journalism?
Sure. I think I was one of those kids who, I did do this. I remember doing it. I would, when I was little, probably into junior high, I would confess, would host the pretend radio show in my room. I had one of those drafting desks in my room where I would draw and stuff, and then I would host the radio show from there. And when I was even smaller, I would type up the weather report on my typewriter and go stand in front of my closet door with the map and do the weather.
Love it.
I was always sort of really interested in media, newspapers, TV, radio, all of that. So I got involved in newspapers pretty quickly. I was on the student paper at my high school, and then went to Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, which has a fantastic communications college and a radio TV studio and a newspaper with a printing press. I mean, the whole 9 yards, and just fell in love there. It's you probably hear this story a million times on this show, but that was where I sort of found my people, right? I mean, when I got on the college paper, you
goes either way. You'd be surprised.
Yes,
it's either people have really sort of born with that bone in their body where they just have to be part of that conversation, or other people tell me that they fell right into it backwards. So it really surprises me that it could be really either way. But that's so interesting because the student paper is the foundation for so many of your colleagues.
It is, and it's probably an interesting time for student newspapers right now, just because it's interesting times for newspapers in general. And I don't know exactly where that segment is these days, but I would think it still has to be very important for anybody, I think, who wants to be in any wing of journalism, anywhere, to try to get involved in your student paper if you can, because you will learn so much. Just the practical doing of the thing. It tells you, it'll show you what you want to do, and it will show you what you don't want to do. And that's often even the more valuable lesson. When I was at Arkansas State University from 1995 to 1999, that was when Jonesboro, that was where we had a school shooting. One of the first sort of, I guess the latter of the big, national attention grabbing school shootings at Westside Elementary School. And so, which was a horrible event. But a lot of national news organizations called the college and wanted stringers to help report the story. And so several of us went to work for different news organizations, just to basically stringers, really, just to gather up what information we could figure out. And I got a stringing job through the New York Times, and quickly figured out that this type of journalism maybe wasn't for me. Being that close to a tragedy, of course, you don't always get to pick these things, and tragedy happens when you least expect it. And I admire the journalists who are able to cover those tragedies, and do it very well and sensitively. But as a college student, I felt like, that was kind of a weird moment for me, because I thought, do I really want to do this job? Do I want to be in this profession? I can't go to a crying family member and share their story. That felt really wrong to me. And so I did not do a good job. I completely botched the stringing assignment, but I learned a valuable lesson in that, well, maybe there are certain areas of journalism that you don't need to go into, but maybe there are other areas of journalism that you could go into. And that's sort of part of what led me here, I think, and that realization.
Well, and I think that that's true. You know, so many, at least one of my other guests, several of my guests were at the Capitol during January 6th, and they talked about how the differences between being a wartime correspondent and being a Capitol Hill correspondent, and how that particular day was a moment where they really got a very different
Yes.
perspective and sense of how their colleagues really do that at a different time. And I think that that's true of some of those more, I mean, that really takes a very special brand of connection. My guest earlier in the month, Larry Miller, talked about the fact that he was positioned on a bridge during some freezing weather for over 22
Yes, I
hours,
heard.
sort of,
Yes.
on the front lines. And those, I think, how wonderful for you, though, that that opportunity presented itself so early, and you could, sort of have that moment to identify that as something that, while you appreciate that that's something that's necessary and needed, maybe not necessarily something that's for you, right?
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. We were fortunate and again, it was a tragedy, and no one would wish for that
Never, no, of
situation,
course not.
certainly. But it does go to the, there's a practical learning aspect that you get when you work in these kinds of student publications, and it can be, it doesn't have to be a school shooting, it can be just anything, reporting on meetings and going covering city council and covering your college governance and all of that, and it really shows you all the different kinds of things you can get involved in, and it teaches you to write really well, I think, and write quickly. And to me, writing remains sort of the foundation. If all the things that have happened in the 20 something years since I've been in college, when the internet was just a glimmer of something,
It's
um,
changed so much since we got started.
it has, but writing remains, I believe, at the core of it all. And if you can learn to write well,
Mm.
and concisely and in an engaging way, you can adapt that to almost any other medium, I think, that we can come up with,
Yeah, no
and be
question.
successful. And I think it's valued. There are a lot of people that you run across who just sort of have trouble with that piece of it. And if you're missing that piece of it, that's a piece you need to work on. I feel
Yeah.
like.
It's a foundational piece that you really do need. Talk to me a little bit about Arkansas business, because it is,
Mhm.
I know, a must read in your state, because so much of the business and the economy all really intersect also with government and how the process is really working there. I know
Mhm.
you've got some really big gold label companies that are there in the state that are
Oh
making a
man,
lot of
yeah.
news. And talk to me a little bit about the publication itself and how your
Mhm.
process works.
So, sure. Arkansas Business was founded in 1984. We are part of a niche publishing group, Arkansas Business Publishing Group, here in downtown Little Rock. We publish more than 20 publications. Arkansas Business is the only weekly newspaper that we do, but we do a lot of annual guides and magazines and monthly magazines. We do a society magazine here locally. We have a bridal magazine that we put out a couple times a year. We have a web marketing and web development advertising agency that we own called Flex 360 here in the building
Mhm.
as well. So we do a little bit of everything.
Sure.
Arkansas Business is just a piece of it, but we've got about 80 people right now. Our company just bought another magazine publisher called 360 West in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay.
And so we're getting our toes in that water out there, which is an exciting market. But Arkansas Business has sort of been and remains the flagship newspaper of this company. And we're a weekly newspaper. We have a daily website, arkansasbusiness.com.
Mhm.
And that's sort of where I kind of come into the picture. I I met Arkansas Business's then publisher, Jeff Hankins, at Arkansas State University. He was an Arkansas State alum, and met him through those channels. And so when it was time for me to graduate and I was looking for a job, he swooped in at the right moment and offered me what is very rare in journalism when you're starting out, which is a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 reporting job for
Wow.
Arkansas Business Newspaper. It's just, and I feel I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, I feel incredibly lucky to never have worked midnight shifts or chased
Right.
cops or chased ambulances, but I also feel like maybe I missed out a little bit on that experience too, because
I'm sure
those are
someone
good
would be
formative
happy.
experiences. I'm
Someone would
sure
be
they
happy
would.
to
That's
give you that opportunity.
absolutely, yes, yes. But so that sounded appealing to me. But at the time, we were a weekly newspaper, and we had just the bare bones of a website. So this is in 1999. Our one shot was our weekly newspaper, and we reported what we reported then, and then we had to wait another week. And Jeff really had a vision for a website that would be a daily news provider of business news in Arkansas.
Right.
And our target audience is business decision makers here in Arkansas, business and political decision makers. And so it's a small audience, but it's a mighty audience, and it's a choice audience for advertisers. And so Jeff's vision was this website, arkansasbusiness.com, and I volunteered to be the first online editor. And we launched that website in December 2000. And sort of the centerpiece of that website, in addition to just posting daily news throughout the day as it happened, was a daily newsletter called the Daily Report. Right. And we send it out every day at noon, or between 11:30 and noon, with that day's business headlines. And so we were doing this in the early 2000s, and we had a host of other newsletters that were sort of divided up by industry. So we've got a weekly manufacturing newsletter, a weekly media newsletter, all the industry verticals that you might imagine.
Sure.
But newsletters were a centerpiece of our strategy at the time. And I cannot believe, if I went back in time and told myself that we're still going to be doing newsletters in 23 years, I don't know that I would believe you, but they remain an integral part, and they're everywhere. That's right. Absolutely. I mean, that's, you look at the Axios pieces and Morning Brew and Punch Bowl and just all these newsletters. I mean, that's just the way to get going and make immediate impact. Absolutely. And they've evolved into something entirely different too. So, but that was how I really got involved was I worked for the newspaper. I worked on the newspaper exclusively for about a year and a half, but then went full time to the web, and then did that for the next 20 years.
And that's like the busiest. That's the busiest beat. I when I came up, I was working in New Jersey. A couple months back, I talked to Steve Kornacki, who was now as the MSNBC, NBC, and omnipresent Steve Kornacki. But he early in that time, probably around the same time that you were building your site, he was at a site in New Jersey called Politics NJ, which was also the same kind of model, the same kind of breaking news, must read, happening in the moment, and really was informing that political and that business audience in a way that people were craving, right? Because the model was changing. You were no longer waiting until the evening news to find out what was happening. You had to know in the minute, right. So you could maneuver and change and adjust whether it's your lobbying strategy or your political strategy or whatever it is. And that has really shaped the way all news is consumed at this point. So really sort of cutting edge and new for you, I'm sure at the time. And Kornacki said this when we spoke. He said when he reported to his folks that he was going to be working on a website, they were for sure that he was unemployable or, something to that degree, because it was such a new concept to parents of journalism students, right? But what they didn't realize, and now probably do, is that was the trend and the movement amongst the reporting set, for sure.
Yeah, it's been amazing how all that has developed. And then, of course, social media boomed in kind of the mid 2000s. Twitter became a pretty big important part of what we do. We got on Twitter pretty early, and so we kind of translated that breaking news spirit to social media. And that's when I thought, well, maybe the end of email is in sight, when social media started showing up. And I thought, well, maybe this is the new distribution platform of choice. But we've really gone back around now to almost. Yeah. And no one wants to be dependent on social media, I think, and certainly not a publisher after all that we've been through and all that we've done. So to have ownership of your own website and your own newsletter distribution service, all that first party data that you can get from that about readers and have that direct relationship, that's just been, that's been so important for us and continues to be just very important to how we even are thinking about the future of how we do things.
Sure. And no question. It's come right back around with email. I'm surprised at how many more newsletters are coming online and how many people are offering more and fresh and different content in a way that's even new to, the entry of Substack and some of these other platforms that people are bringing online. Lance, I'm curious, you've been at this for a while, but the state itself, I've had a chance to visit, and I actually media trained a whole bunch of female legislators and folks in Arkansas several years back now. So it's been a little while. But I've had a chance to be in the capital. It's a great capital and a great state. And it's busy. And when you come from
Yes.
New Jersey, we think we're from the center of the universe. We think we're the most interesting state capital, but I know that that's not necessarily the truth. Now that I've come out and grown up. But I'm curious for you, is there a set of stories? Is there a story in particular? Is there something that stands out to you in the time that you've been a journalist that you're especially proud of? Something that you reflect back on and say, "Wow, that was a moment I really enjoyed."
Well, in terms of sort of business intersecting with government, there's a good one, and I think it continues to pay dividends in big ways, and in ways that we are just now, I think, coming to grips with here in Arkansas, or really starting to understand. Was the growth of our steel industry in Northeast Arkansas, and that's been a long time coming, like a lot of things. But it really kind of, well, we've had a steel industry in Arkansas for a long time, stretching back to the early 80s.
Sure.
We've had some pretty big steel producers in Mississippi County in extreme Northeast Arkansas.
Mhm.
Nucor has been up there for a lot of years. Then 2013, our then governor, Mike Beebe, announced a deal to bring a $1.1 billion steel mill to Mississippi County, and it's called Big River Steel. And that was an interesting story because it was enabled under an amendment to the U.S. Constitution called Amendment 82, which allowed Arkansas to borrow a lot in bonds, or to borrow a lot of money to provide incentives for so-called super projects,
Sure.
basically.
Mhm.
And these things can be controversial sometimes in terms of, you talk about corporate welfare and
Yeah.
giveaways or whatever.
Sure.
But the legislature at the time really worked together to pass what amounted to multi-million dollar incentive project to bring this project to Northeast Arkansas. And it was a project that, frankly, some people weren't convinced was going to fly.
Mm.
But a gentleman named John Correnti brought this project to the legislature. They passed $125 million incentive package and built this massive steel mill in Northeast Arkansas. And so for the last 10 years, that thing has been the cutting edge steel mill in the state. And eventually it caught the attention of U.S. Steel, which is the steel maker
Yep.
in the United States. And
Mhm.
so U.S. Steel has in the interim bought Big River Steel. And then last year announced plans to build a $3.3 billion additional steel mill in the area.
Wow.
And it's going to employ 700 people, 200 contract workers. I mean, it's going to be transformational to that region.
That's
And so the
cool.
thought that something that sort of happened 10 years ago with groundwork that really goes back to the 80s is
Mhm.
now coming to fruition, really transforming the economy of that region. That's a upper Delta region
Right.
where agriculture remains huge, but there's still a need for jobs, a need for good, high-paying jobs. A
Of
lot of
course.
jobs left that region
Mhm.
over a lot of decades, and so now the thought that we've got this giant economic engine in that area coming back. I mean, Arkansas, that Mississippi County is about to be the biggest steel-producing county in the United States.
Wow, that's exciting.
Which is crazy to think about when you
Yeah,
think
it sure
about, I
is.
mean, Pennsylvania,
That's
hello,
right. That's right.
it's amazing. So all that's, and the South has benefited from some of that shift to this,
Of
from
course.
the North to the South,
Mhm.
obviously cheaper labor and whatnot. But we're really, I think, now in a vantage point where we've got a prominent steelmaker that could lead to perhaps electric automakers in Arkansas. We've got some electric vehicle startups in Arkansas that have moved headquarters here. We've got one called Canoe that's moved to Northwest Arkansas. We've
Interesting.
got another electric vehicle maker that's moved from California to Northeast Arkansas called Envirotech. It's started production already. We have a burgeoning lithium find in South Arkansas, extreme southern Arkansas, El Dorado area,
Uh-huh.
Union County.
Mhm.
Lithium is a key ingredient for electric batteries.
Yeah.
So we've got all these pieces in place
Wow,
to
that's really
perhaps
cool.
have an electric vehicle industry in Arkansas. And so that's the hope of economic developers. And all this work is sort of paying off. And we've had a front row seat to it at Arkansas Business. We've chronicled all this stuff every step of the way. And it's been really fun to watch.
Well, that's terrific. And I think that that's the kind of thing, having spent some time eh, in the administration myself and spend some time talking and about the importance of bringing those kinds of industries back in a smarter way to the US where we can,
Yes.
be at the head and the front of technology in a way that's smarter, faster, quicker, more affordable, but also bring that good economic growth to those regions is huge. It's
Right.
huge. And also just continues to bring up the quality of life for the people there too. So how fun for you to be sort of reporting from the front lines on that too. It's exciting. I'm sure it was a little spicy though, because that's a big infusion of cash to
Yes.
bring to
Yes,
that
it
kind of
is.
project. But lucky for everybody
Yes.
involved, it looks like it's headed in the right direction. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of folks behind the scenes, of course, to make something like this happen. And
Of
people
course.
locally on the ground in that county. An economic developer named Cliff Chitwood has been at hard at work on that project for years. And then multiple gubernatorial administrations here in Arkansas have worked on this. And so it's the best of what I think government and business can put together when everyone pulls in the same direction, and we put our petty differences aside and we try to work for the common good. And so that's another
Let's
reason it's
hope
kind
that's
of
a
an
trend in
inspiring
the right
story.
direction.
I hope so. I hope it is too. Absolutely.
When I talk to folks like you who are in the editor space, I often talk about the fact that you are in a unique environment where not only are you receiving pitches from outside from public affairs people, you are also receiving pitches from inside the industry, or excuse me, inside the newsroom from folks who
Yes.
want to tell their story. Do you have words of wisdom or advice that you give to people as they bring you? And there's no magic answer, but is there something maybe that catches your eye, if it's either coming from outside in or even inside the newsroom to you? Are there
Mhm.
things that catch your eye that you think are breaking through more than others, perhaps at this point?
Well, I will disclaim this by saying I've only been editor of Arkansas Business, the print edition, for a year. So I'm still learning a lot of things,
Okay, good.
but I am so I do not have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination.
None of us
I'm
do.
fortunate, yes, that's right. I'm fortunate that I have a staff that's very experienced. We've got people who've been on staff for 20 and 30 years,
Awesome.
and so I'm very fortunate that they know what they're doing. They know what to look for. They know what moves the needle. And we've watched, or I've watched for 20 years about the things that move the needle too. I mean, we're always looking for dollar signs in Arkansas business. I mean,
Of
we
course.
want to know the value of things. We want to know what people are doing with their money. We want to know how much money people have. Uh, all of those things are important to us and to our readers because we sort of see ourselves in some ways as a guide to doing business in Arkansas. So the intelligence that we provide about the value of real estate, the value of investments, the value of companies, what the biggest companies are, and then the players, the people behind all the moves. Who's doing what, who got the promotion, who's going to lead this agency, what is their history. All the stuff about the people behind the deals
That
is
makes
very
sense.
important as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. So, I just try to think about a business owner and we have a breadth of those. I mean, obviously we've got the biggest companies in the world in Arkansas.
Yes, you do.
And then we've got yes. And then we've got the
Very small
smaller
ones.
companies too.
Hmm.
Right. And that's the bulk of the readership, frankly. So what can we do to help business owners make decisions about how to manage their workforce,
Sure.
about how to control costs, about how to find people, which is so hard right now.
Yeah.
Anything we can provide in those areas too, what we think are of value. And then also just ways that you can connect in your community to other business leaders, how you can make a difference in your community, how you can contribute to the economic well-being of your
Hmm.
community. We're always looking to do that in Arkansas. It's interesting because we're a small state, and so everybody kind of knows everybody else in a weird way. I mean, you can't talk bad about anybody anywhere because somebody else is going to know who you're talking about.
And they're going to tell
We're
them that you said it.
That's right, exactly. But that's one of the cool things about doing business here is that you can get to people in power pretty easily. There's not a lot of levels of hierarchy here. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
pretty compressed. If you looked at an org chart of Arkansas, I mean, you
Pretty
can get to the
flat.
governor pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people know each other and you can forge relationships really easily here.
I love
And
that.
in a sincere way too. People honestly, I think, want to help each other here in Arkansas. So if we can, if we can help facilitate some of that, that's a bonus for us too.
I get that. And I like that what you said is really the way I interpret it is try to build the story in your head ahead of time. What are the numbers? What are the impacts? Who are the players,
Yes.
right? Because it's like writing a
Yes.
script, right? What is the script and how is that relevant to the audience that you're looking to connect with? So that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And
Right.
even 1 year on the job, I think that's very sage advice. So thank you for that.
Well,
Lance is
yeah,
it's
sorry.
it's 1 year in journalism though. So like we know that that is quite a bit more in real life.
It's longer. Yeah. It's like dog years, I think.
Yeah, I
So,
think so. I think so.
yep.
Lance, as we get to the end of our conversation, can you recommend for me someone that you work with in the journalism space for a future episode of the podcast?
Well, I have a whole list here, but I was thinking about Wes Brown, who I've known throughout the years. Wesley Brown, he is involved in several publications here in Arkansas, the Arkansas Delta Informer, which is new, and Black Consumer News, which is also new. I believe that the website is blackconsumernews.com. I think that's going to be correct,
Okay.
but that's the name. And he's also a publisher of the Daily Record, which is another, I believe, a weekly publication here in Arkansas.
Wow.
And so he's involved in a lot of new. The two efforts that he's involved in that are kind of new is the Arkansas Delta Informer and Black Consumer News, which is aimed at minority audiences. And so, you know, we need to see more of that. We want to see that prosper. And Wes is just a fantastic guy. He's been around business and political circles for much longer than I have. He's worked many places as both an editor and reporter, but also in corporate communications as well. And so he brings all that experience to bear on some of these new projects that he's working on here in Arkansas. And so I think he'd be fantastic. I have not told him that I was going to tell you this, but I think he would be a fantastic guest on the show. So.
Well, everybody likes to be nominated. Not everybody likes to serve, but that is also everybody's very grateful for all the kind words that we say. So I will let him know that you nominated him. And Lance, I am so grateful for your time today. Thank you for being a guest.
Sure. Thanks for having me. We're happy to be here.